All right, there he is. I finally got him. Elie Mystal joining me, and congratulations, sir. Your book is #2 on the bestseller, New York Times bestseller list for nonfiction. This is such a big deal. I've obviously told everybody about it, but congratulations. We talked about this 2 years ago, and you literally manifested it, and it's happening, and I'm so excited for you. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's been a bit of a wild ride. I mean, obviously, you write a book, you think it's good, right? I mean, you don't write something you think, oh, this is crap. Nobody's gonna want to read this. I wasn't sure that it would sell as well as it has, so that's been very gratifying. It's also been amazing that it's sold basically through word of mouth. So if you're hearing me and you've bought the book, thank you so much. And if you told somebody else to buy the book, thank you so much, because that's how it's selling. For all of the media I do, you figure I had this whole media rollout, right? My book launched March 1st. I had this whole thing that's going to be on this show and that show, and right. The Saturday, March 1st was a Tuesday. The Saturday before, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine.
Oh, Vladimir Putin cockblocked your book launch?
And I got bumped from everything because while I have many skills, Eastern European, global geopolitical expert is not one of them.
Well, you'd probably be more accurate on foreign policy and national security than some of the best analysts who have gotten this wrong. So, well, so you've done a ton of TV shows, like pretty much almost every high-profile show, including, like, obviously all the cable networks love Elie Mystal, enough to have him on without giving him a contract, apparently. But like The View, right? I mean, what shows? What did you do? Did you do any late night shows? Did I miss that?
No, man. Again, I had things lined up, but Ukraine. So the only one that didn't bump me, the only kind of main show that didn't. I mean, I got bumped from all of the cable stuff launch week. The only show that didn't bump me was The View, which was very nice of them.
Launch week matters because you want to get those numbers for your book. The publishing industry wants those, but it also doesn't matter because you are more of a marathoner here. I mean, like, it didn't matter. It's #2. It didn't matter whenever you started promoting the book. It still made a difference, and that's a tribute to I think what you're saying. Like, your media appearances are so interesting and funny and I guess some people would say provocative, that everybody kind of knows who you are. What do you attribute it to? Obviously, the book is amazing for a lot of reasons because it's for more than people who aren't lawyers. But what do you attribute the success to?
Well, again, a lot of credit has to go to the people who have read it and people who have kind of proselytized it and evangelized it to their family and their friends. But that's actually, I think, to me, always has been a big key to my success, right? Like, the people who follow me, the people who interact with me on social media or whatever, like, I interact with people like they're people, right? And I expect a certain level of, like, engagement and pushback and conversation and thought and whatever, whether I'm talking to you, Pete, in a bar, or I'm talking to somebody on the Twitter mentions, right? And I think that what's been really helpful for the book launch hasn't been the force of my personality, but it's been the force of the personality of all these people who I've interacted with, who then are going out and interacting in their lives. And that's a huge part of why I wrote the book in the first place. Like, it all is very, like, I don't want to sound like, I'm a 2022 business person, but like, there's a lot of synergy there, Pete.
Well, it is, but in turn, that is the force of your personality. I mean, the fact that you engage people, the fact that people like to talk to you, and that you're accessible to them to a large way is why. But let me just ask you, like, about, so the book is doing great. #2, your next book is going to hopefully make you a fortune, and you're going to be set. We have talked a lot off air about, our lives and our ambitions and so on. But to me, one of the great kind of, like, injustices is that you still don't have your own show. But the question is, what do you want and what have you been given? Clear it up for me right now. What do you think it is, or what do you want out of media? Your own radio, TV, whatever. If someone could just hand it to you, what would it be? And why do you not have it? Because I've made this argument to your face and behind your back many times. Elie Mystal is an entertainment machine. He can be highbrow and thoughtful about just about anything, and also entirely entertaining and talk about anything. So what's the deal?
Okay, well, let's start here. I love my current job. I'm a columnist at The Nation. I love The Nation. My editor at The Nation, Lizzie Ratner, is like the best person I've ever met. It's certainly the best person I've ever worked with.
Wow.
It would take a lot for me to leave her and leave that publication. I've really found a home there. I got a price. Right?
Well, you could do something in addition, though, right now. I mean, like, forget hosting your own show. If you didn't want to front your own show because you don't want to leave this great gig, like, you're not a paid contributor at these networks. Is that right?
That is correct, Pete.
And at one point, after I met you, when we first met each other at MSNBC, at some point during that time, you got benched. Which is hilarious. I don't know if you can remind me as to what you said, but like when you look back on everything that's been said on TV in the last 2 years, what you said is like, it's crazy. It's crazy. What was that?
I tend to, I made I don't even want to go back into it actually, because it's like, there's a bit of nuance there. And that's kind of that's the problem that I've run into quite a few times. I feel in my multimedia career, I'm actually making some nuanced points. Like that's the thing. Like you see the hair and you hear the bombast and whatever, and you think I'm making like a very like point A to point B point. And I'm usually not. I'm usually saying something like nuanced or subtle with bombast and with the hair and with the whatever. That's kind of how the sauce works. And that trips people up. There are people who think that I'm going one way and I slam on the brakes and they just keep shooting right past, and they blame me for it because they ran into the wall, right? But the other thing that I think happens when you look at these large corporate legacy mainstream media outlets, right? The kinds of things that I say, the kinds of truths that I am trying to represent, from my perspective, rub the very wrong people, the worst people from my career in the wrong way, right? Like if you are a never Trump Republican, right? There are lots of liberal commentators that don't bother you, because there are lots of liberal commentators that are just like, hey, we got to beat Trump. Welcome to the party. Politics makes strange bedfellows. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Like, there are a lot of people like that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm the guy who's like, wait, you are responsible for Roberts, you never Trump bullcrapper. You are responsible for Sam Alito. See, I remember Bush v. Gore. I remember 2004 and the appointment of John Roberts. I remember 2013 in Shelby County. Yep. So I remember all the things that let's call them Bush Republicans did to make the Trump Republicans possible. And I never let them forget that. And because I never let them forget that, if they happen to be in the position to decide who gets contracts on television, for instance, that becomes a problem for me.
I understand that. That's a nuanced argument, but I always argue now about you. Okay, here is an offensive, angry black man who might even attack you personally, but he's going to get huge ratings and make everybody rich. And that actually is the only thing that matters. So if you wanted to be really petty, like that's the truth about you, period. That's the truth. That anybody can interpret and have an opinion on Elie Mystal. In the end, he's going to get huge ratings and make everybody rich. Are you do you not agree with that? Are you saying they can't put their personal feelings aside about what that you might call the Constitution trash, or might actually say something about them, and so they have a personal grudge against your views and your opinions, versus this guy is he will make everybody millions of dollars.
They don't want that heat. I mean,
they don't want the heat.
Yeah, there are executives and people who just don't want the heat that I bring, because they're going to get pushed back from it, right? Like I have been on right-wing media constantly since the book came out, because if you ask me about the Constitution, I'm going to say the Constitution is kind of trash, because that's the first line of my damn book. It's also the last line of my damn. The entire frame of the book is around that point, and I spend 70,000 words explaining it, right? So if you ask me on live television, I'm going to say the same thing, right? But that gets me popped on Breitbart and popped on the Daily Caller and popped on the Daily Stormer and popped on the Daily whatever white supremacist thing they're calling it next, right? I get hit on all those things, and they yell at me and they say like, "Oh, MSNBC contributor." I'm not a contributor. MSNBC contributor calls Constitution, and then other people have to defend what, and they don't want any of that because they can have a lot of people on their air that don't cause them that gruff, right? Like that don't cause them that pushback. I cause heats. And while yes, Heat brings ratings. Heat puts butts in the seats, as they say in the sports world, right? But they don't want to have to defend. They don't want to have to own what I say, right? So they're happy to have me on because they don't have to own it, and they can kind of get the
right.
bump, if you will. But they don't have to own it, and so they don't have to defend it. And that's
I don't understand why some independent person who has money can just put $1 million down to create the Elie Mystal show and then watch the money coming in either. I mean, that's the future. Obviously, what I'm doing here, like if you did what I'm doing overnight, you would be making 10 times what I'm making.
You also remember, and this goes back to kind of a little bit of, you had to understand how racism in America works, right? So again, I want to go, actually I do want to go too deep, screw it. So like one of the ways that racism in America works is that when you see talented Black people, it's not racism is not like, oh, that Black person can't be talented. I mean, sure, people who watch Fox News think that way, but like for the main center mass of American racism, it's not that, right? They say, oh, that Black person is talented. That Black person who is talented should keep doing what they're doing over and over and over and over and over again, right? Whereas when they see a talented white person, the response is, oh, that white person is very talented at this. Maybe they can do that. That white person is talented at that. Maybe they can do this other thing. Like the possibilities, the opportunities for white people expand upon themselves because past success for white people indicates the ability to do other things in the future. Whereas past success for Black people indicate the ability to keep doing that one thing that they've decided that we're good at, right? Once I became good, once people recognized that I was good at writing columns, they were going to let me write columns over and over and over and over again before they put me on television, right? I had to like kick in a door to get put on television. Well, once I got put on television, they were going to let me do television over and over and over and over again, but they're not going to give me my own show, right? Same thing with the book, right? Like the book being a bestseller, that's going to, I didn't know Elie could do that, right? Like, why wouldn't you think that I could write a good book? I'm a pretty good columnist. Why wouldn't you think that I could expand it into a book? But a lot of people didn't think I could. So, like, that's kind of that. That's not a me thing. That's a race in America thing that all Black people have to fight against, whether they're fighting against it in the kind of multimedia entertainment sphere, or they're fighting against it in their, to show that they can do more than write a TPS report. Like it's a constant thing.
I understand that, but I think I might disagree on I think that's true of corporate media for sure, what you're saying. But like right now, I've always said this about you. Like you would make anybody money. You would make anybody money independently. Are you telling me that nobody's come and said, hey, I'm going to pay you to do this thing? And by the way, here's the thing, as I already said about you, so one of the people's favorite things about your Twitter timeline is your tweets about your family. Your kids say this, your wife says that. Like you could do a sitcom tomorrow about your family. You could do anything. My pitch is to put you in a situation where you have no idea what you're doing, a skill that you don't have, like, I don't know, carpentry, I don't know. But and just let the camera roll and watch you get mad and frustrated and argue about why this doesn't make any sense. Like we're watching that and everybody's making money. And I honestly don't understand why that hasn't happened. Forget about the law. Forget about the Constitution. Forget about all the highbrow shit. Just watch him try to make a quiche. Watch him parent. Like, let's go. Let's do this. Is that something that you would even entertain if someone came to you? I'm not pitching something. I have no money. But I mean, like, I just feel like somebody should be doing that.
Think about who does have the money, though. Think about the venture capital people, right? They're all white, dude. And so every black owned enterprise has this problem, right? Like you get into a situation where the best example for this is actually not me, it's Tiffany Cross. People now know Tiffany Cross because she took over one of the 2 weekend spots. She split it with Jonathan Capehart. Tiffany Cross is on Saturdays now on MSNBC, runs a great show. But before that, Tiffany Cross ran a news organization, a wire service, essentially one of these, political inside the beltway DC primers, right? And if you know anything about how DC works, like people get, a download of news from a reliable source. That's what Politico kind of started as, just an inside baseball DC rag. So Tiffany Cross had a rag from a black perspective. She called it The Beat. It was really good. It was getting traction. It was kind of setting the table for all these DC insiders about what black and brown people were talking about, but what women were talking about that day. She got to the point where she needed venture capital money. She couldn't get it. She couldn't get it. A white person running what Tiffany Cross was doing, and getting the success that Tiffany Cross was getting, would have had money showered down upon them.
I don't
Tiffany
disagree.
Cross couldn't get $10, right?
I don't disagree with anything what you said, of course, but I'm saying a white rich asshole should invest in a blue chip stock, which is you, regardless of anything else. Anyway, I don't want to belabor that. I just think it's an interesting thing. I always want to talk about it, and I'm sure those offers will probably start coming in at some point, but it doesn't even matter because, like you already said, you're pretty content with what you're doing. The book is number 2. You have this amazing column at The Nation that hopefully everybody is subscribing to and reading, and there's plenty of other things that I certainly want to talk with you about. So I don't know. I'm just such like so many other people, a huge fan of everything that you do and say.
I appreciate you in my corner. I appreciate having people in my corner because it's hard out here sometimes. Like, trust me, the downside of being a best-selling New York Times author, which is pretty awesome, but the only downside is that, oh my God, just like my mentions, my inbox the last couple of weeks from just angry.
What's it look like?
Just angry white people, just not even like able to like get a thought out. Just like, you said the Constitution is trash. Yes, that means you're trash. That's a non sequitur, sir. Like, they're just.
Have you ever responded to anybody like that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Are you like, I do have some trashy qualities. I have shortcomings. There's no doubt.
It's a way that you ever kind of in a like medieval fair, like you see the swordsmith like sharpening their sword on the whetstone, right? That's some of these. You sharpen a sharp edge on a dull surface, right? Like that's actually a thing in sword fighting-y. And so, like, yeah, occasionally I'll just to stretch the muscles and make sure the wit is still working right. I'll find some idiot that actually had the temerity to find my email address, and like I'll go a couple of rounds just to make sure that I'm still got the the wits going.
There's a lot of reasons as to why you're getting those types of reactions, but it's mostly because people are offended by anybody criticizing a sacrosanct document, but especially a black person, and even more especially you, because of the way you deliver it. But before I get to that, I just want to mention you you having this book, writing what you wrote in it, and then going on certain shows is perhaps one of the more entertaining things one can watch on the internet, because you have gone, there's been a couple bad bookings where they weren't ready, like a local news show, and you go in with all your bombast and your points, and like the anchors are like, okay, thank you. So what you're saying is we've got to go to break. This is super weird. You can't say those things. Like, there have been some hilarious awkward moments where people just aren't on your level or aren't prepared or aren't ready. And could you create more of those, please?
It's been a ride, man. Look, I again, the very first line of my book is our Constitution is not good. The very last line of my book is I'm here to tell you the Constitution is trash. It's Republicans who say that it always has to be, right? So again, that is the entire frame of the argument. So if you're going to have me on talking about my book, that's probably going to come up at some point. And like you say, Pete, I've thought about it. I've spent 70,000 words kind of thinking about it. Not everybody kind of has, but that's why you write it. That's why I wrote. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book. I mean, you said that I'm challenging ideas that are sacrosanct. They shouldn't be, right? The Constitution is not gospel. It was not handed down by God. Moses did not bring it back from a mountain. It was written by slavers and colonists and people willing to make deals with slavers and colonists over a summer, right? It's a summer camp project. It's what it is.
Have you, have you ever said that anywhere? I didn't see that. I'm sorry. What I'm hearing you say is that the Constitution, because it was written during the season of summer, you're calling it summer camp, sir? I can't believe I'm offended, but I am. What kind of camp was it? They're wearing wigs.
They wrote it between they got their orange slices. Then they came back and wrote some Constitution, and they went out for a swim, and then right. So, like, the point is that it's a political document. Does it have some good ideas in it? Sure, it's got some great ideas in it. Ideas that I absolutely love so much that I would like to see those ideas applied to everybody living here just once, just to see what it would feel like, right?
Yeah, and you write all about that, so we can get into it. But real quick, you just said something. I want to know what your response is. I often do WWEJ. What would What would Elie do? What would Elie say if someone said to you, "Our rights come from God"? Is that what did they say? Our rights come from? Is that the phrase? I don't understand how to argue that.
It's not an argument. It's because you can't argue that because it's not an argument. It's a declarative statement, right? Like our rights come from God. Okay, that's what you believe. That's great for you to believe that, right? The God created the universe. All right, could be a bang. I mean, but whatever. To each his own. So look, they're deep political philosophy theories that go here, right? There's the natural rights theory that they come from God. There's the social rights. There's a social contract theory. All these different theories about where rights come from. I don't get bogged down in such kind of questions. I don't give a crap where rights come from. I just want them given to everybody.
Yeah, fair enough. Who doesn't have them, by the way, at this point? Or let's go back to when it was written, because I think that the idea that the founding fathers are somehow still on this pedestal, they're certainly being knocked down a notch in the past few years, that's for sure. But this idea that they are on a pedestal and yet nobody else in like American history is seemingly as perfect as they are, from other presidents and anybody else, Dr. King, you name it, across any American icon is not as perfect as they were. But many of them believed in slavery, and they didn't use the word slavery anywhere, right? And so which inherently lets you know they knew that it was bad. Also, John Adams apparently didn't believe. Like, not all of them were slavers or believed in it. And so tell me about why these men in particular are not perfect.
Yeah, so one of the pushbacks I've gotten from the book that I've heard this before, but it's gotten so much more intense since the book came out, is white people telling me that the founding fathers, while yes, they were slavers, they were just doing the best they could. And it was a different time, and slavery was practiced everywhere in the world, and so we can't criticize them for being slavers, which is the biggest load of ahistorical, ignorant crap out there. So, number one, American chattel slavery in the New World, was fundamentally different than the kinds of slavery that had been practiced throughout the ancient world and throughout the old world. The key difference being that in the old world, slavery was a condition of conquest. I conquered you, you are now my slave. That's how it worked from like Assyria to to the discovery of the New World. In the New World, we came up with this new idea that slavery would be a condition inherited from birth, right? So that was already like, that's why we call it chattel slavery, as opposed to distinguish it from ancient slavery, because the idea that you could pass the slave status down to your children and grandchildren in perpetuity forever was pretty new and newly invented in the Americas, in the Caribbean, the South America, and then eventually North America, right? The second thing, so that's just one pushback. The second really obvious pushback is that other people in real time were telling the American colonists that their obsession with slavery was bullcrap, right? People in Europe who were not the best people, believed in kings and queens and whatever, we're still looking over in America and being like, what is that? That is not something y'all should be doing, right? As you said, Pete, there were other abolitionists in America at the time who were like, we shouldn't be having slavery, that's bad. And then another point that when I talk to white people, people always seem to forget this. The slaves knew it was wrong. In real time.
Yeah.
If you had asked them, they would have been like, don't think slavery is a good idea. The free black people knew it was wrong. Native Americans knew it was wrong. Like, there were lots and lots. The only people who didn't know it was wrong just happened to be the people who held slaves and were profiting from slavery. Those were the people who didn't know it was wrong. So miss me with that ahistorical bullcrap, but that's how they are. That's how they were. You know what the biggest slaveholder in America was at the time of the Revolution?
Let me guess. The biggest slaveholder in America at the time of the Revolution?
Yes.
Tommy Jeff?
George Washington.
George W.
Right? Mr. Cannot tell a lie because my slaves do it for me. Right? So
I don't think this was the best. Said that.
Right, so don't tell me that this was. Yeah. So what do I take from all that? Do not tell me that this is the best we could do. Do not tell me that the Constitution represents the best version of human enlightenment ever written, because it ain't. Because if you have people who are that morally culpable, who are that purposefully ignorant of their own bullcrap, and people who are willing to make deals with those people, excluding all non-white people, excluding all poor white people, excluding all women from their little, again, constitutional summer camp, then no, I do not think that document represents the very best that we can do as a human society. And I'll be damned if in 2022, when you ask me, should we have this right or should we have this right? What should this be legal? Should that be legal? I'll be damned if I go and look back to what Thomas Jefferson thought with his rapist ass. No, I don't care what Thomas Jefferson thought. I don't care what James Madison thought.
Why do you think there, and maybe I'm wrong, there hasn't been more criticism, the type of criticism that you're now engaging in your book? Because obviously the kind of threats and comments and arguments that you're getting were, you expected them. Anybody would expect them if you're going to be critical of the Founding Fathers and the United States Constitution, which is encased in glass in a museum, and it's perfect. But it seems like, and I'm no legal scholar, but it seems like there hasn't been as much of certainly the type of criticism about the Constitution that you made. Why not? Why does it take in, and maybe I'm missing it, Elie Mystal to write this book and to kind of walk through the fire? Maybe not first. I don't know.
Well, not first, but one of the reasons why I wrote the book is because I've gotten this compliment. It's my favorite compliment so far about the book. It's other Black people saying, I feel more confident to say these things now. Because of what you're doing and because of this work, right?
I think certainly, and to a lesser extent, so do white people now. I mean, I've kind of always lightly been like, I don't get it, like I don't understand why. But go ahead, sorry.
So that's been very gratifying. So why aren't there very many people who do that? Well, first of all, there are fewer people who have legal education, right?
Sure.
And so, like, if you don't have a legal education, if you don't have a background in law, you kind of see these things that maybe don't make sense or whatever. But then some lawyer with their, expensive degree, not intelligent degree, expensive degree, comes up and says, "Well, actually, Pete, there's a really good reason for that to happen." You haven't been to law school, you don't know, so you're like, okay, I'm sure there's some reason why we have 50 state electoral systems as opposed to. I'm sure there's some legal, right? So you kind of, if you're not a lawyer, you kind of accept what the lawyers tell you, right? Why do the lawyers tell you that? Well, because all of law school, those 3 years of education is generally beating out your sense of morality, beating out your sense of decency, and replacing it with like thinking like a lawyer, trying to replace it with this dispassionate legal brain that accepts as a fait accompli that the way the Constitution works is the only way that it can work, because it's the only way that a legal system could work in this country, right? Which, so there are people who, there are legal scholars, there are law professors who will write the occasional law review article pointing out some flaw or with the interpretation or the experience of constitutional law. There's lots of that, but it kind of popularized, I'm going to explain this in regular terms without the jargon. There hasn't been a lot of people doing that because of look at the pushback that I'm getting, because these documents are thought to be so sacred. And the last thing I want to say, Pete, there's a reason why America fetishizes its constitution differently than other countries, certainly differently than old world countries, and what have you. It's because we don't have anything else pulling us together, right? Like, we're a nation of immigrants. No matter what Tucker tries to tell you, we are a nation of immigrants. We all came from somewhere else, right? We don't share a race. We don't share a religion. We don't share an ethnicity. We don't share a lot. We share an idea, and that idea that is America is represented to us in our Constitution, right? So there's cultural stitching that happens in America through the Constitution because we don't have a whole lot else pulling us together. And so when I say, like, look, this cultural stitching that we kind of are relying on to say that we're the same country, it's actually a pretty flawed document that, desperately needs to be fixed. It's kind of attacking at something I understand that I'm attacking at something very kind of core American values because we have so few things pulling us together, which is why not a lot of people have done it.
Yeah, really well said. Really well said. And I think in many ways, you are the one that we've been waiting for. And I'm not even joking, because your humor and your passion. Have you ever done anything dispassionately, like during the day?
Sex. No, I'm just...
Of all the things.
That was a joke.
Great joke. Oh my God. That is hilarious. Everybody just hold on that image. So the Constitution isn't perfect, Elie. Let me do it more condescendingly. That, my friend, is what amendments are for.
Right. So let me tell you something about your amendment process, right?
I felt like that was also condescending.
Right. First of all, let's consider that the amendment process requires us to pass a bill through Congress. So you got to go through the apartheid Senate, which gives more representation to states than land. All right. Then you got it signed by the president. And then it's got to be ratified by 3/4 of the state, by their state legislatures. Do you know how many state legislatures have been majority minority in American history? I'll tell you, 0. Do you know how many state legislatures have been majority women in American history? I'll tell you, 1, Nevada, in 2018.
Huh.
So even in the amendment process, what we're dealing with is rules written by white people for white people, written by white men for white men, ratified by white men. So even that process is fundamentally steeped in many of the flaws of the original document itself, number one. Number two, and this now becomes actually my expertise, right? Because while we might write this amendment or that amendment and think that we've done a good job, who gets to interpret those amendments? Who gets to interpret what those amendments mean or say? Well, it's the Supreme Court. Not by constitutional fiat, by the way. The Constitution does not say the Supreme Court has the right to overturn laws or anything like that. The Supreme Court called upon to itself that power in 1803 in a case called Marbury v. Madison, where the Supreme Court gave itself the right to declare laws passed by Congress unconstitutional. So the Supreme Court has set itself up as the only arbiter of what is constitutional and what is not. That's not how other countries do it, folks, right? The only other country with a high court kind of Western industrialized, rich country or developed country, I don't know what the correct nomenclature is these days, that has nuclear country that has
OECD,
right, a high court as powerful as ours is like India, right? That's not what Canada does not have a high court that can overturn the Canadian Parliament. England does not have a high court that can overturn the Prime Minister. Like, this don't have that, right? We have that, right? And so that's why no matter what you do with the amendment process, a conservative Supreme Court, a white male Supreme Court, can take those amendments and narrow them, or in some cases, pretend they don't exist at all, as happened to the 15th Amendment. We fought a war. We had an amendment. All people can vote, all men can vote, regardless of race, color, or creed, because once again, the white men writing these amendments are white men and nobody else. So that was the 15th Amendment, came out after the Civil War. And the conservatives, at that time they called themselves Democrats. The conservatives put it in a drawer for 100 years. They acted like it didn't exist. So that's your amendment process, right? It's a process that still, at the end of the day, gets to be interpreted by the Supreme Court. We've had 115 Supreme Court justices in American history. 108 of them have been white men. That's a problem. That's a problem with the document. That's a problem with our polity. So, yeah, the amendment process looks good on paper,
right?
But in practice, you get a lot of the same problems.
Should there be a conversation about gaining and losing rights? Because it would seem that this court and this country right now is taking rights that have been won in the past now. We can talk about women's reproductive rights. We can talk about gay rights and obviously voting rights, most importantly. But last week, a United States Senator from Indiana named Mike Braun, during an interview, was asked a question about constitutional rights, specifically states' rights. And he was specifically asked about interracial marriage. And he answered confidently that should be left up to states. He later walked it back, but it didn't matter. It happened. We saw it because we have eyes. So in terms of losing rights, in terms of things like that being said in 2022, where are we? I mean, we're losing rights, right? That's what's happening. We're not gaining.
This has been the long-term conservative project.
I say we. I mean, I, as a straight white guy, I'm still killing.
You'll be okay. You'll be okay. Your daughters, they're the ones who are going to suffer for this, right?
They'll be fine. I know other white straights. I'll get them.
You can get to Montreal if you have to.
Yeah. Well, no, to be more honest, they'll still be able to get their abortions. They'll still be able to get like most of what they need because I have resources and access, and I live in New York still, and things like that. I don't know.
Look, this has been the long-term conservative project. Is to reinterpret, reimagine the Constitution in a way that takes rights away from people as opposed to grants rights to people and protects people. That's why the Federal Society was invented. That's why these judges have been picked by the Republican Party to do exactly what they are doing now. They have spent a generation fighting this world war, and for the most part, liberals haven't even taken the field, right? So when you talk about things like interracial marriage, the case you're talking about is Loving. In the book, I write about how Loving is the conservative kryptonite. It is the case, Loving, the case that allows for interracial marriages, is the case that proves the entire conservative project is morally bankrupt, because the conservative project can't square loving with their other theories of constitutional interpretation. And I will tell you why. Basically, without getting too much into the weeds, there are three kinds of rights that we have in our society, right? Political rights, civil rights, and social rights. Political rights are the rights to participate in the polity, right? The right to vote is a political right that Republicans are trying to take away just in the moment. Civil rights are the rights to participate in the economy. So the right to have a hotel room, regardless of your race. The right to sit at a lunch counter. Those are civil rights. Social rights are the rights to socialize, to be part of the society, right? So the right to marry is a social right. The right to marry, the right to have a wedding party is a social right. Now, you can make an argument, the conservatives do or don't, depending on whether or not it suits them. You can make an argument that the Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and then the 19th Amendment eventually, 19th Amendment is what gives the right to vote to women. The Reconstruction Amendments and the 19th Amendments together conferred all political rights to all people living here. You can make an argument, the conservatives don't like this as much, but you can make an argument that those amendments conferred all civil rights to all people living here, and that was the intention of the white men who wrote those amendments. But you can make no argument that those amendments conferred all social rights to all people living here, because the white men who wrote those amendments were explicit in their rejection of social rights for everybody. They thought very clearly that only white people, white men, deserved all social rights. So if you're going to say that we have a constitutional right to social rights, like the right to marry, like the right to throw a party, well, then you have to believe that the Constitution evolves, that the Constitution lives and breathes and can be interpreted based on where we are today in society, not where they were in the 18th or 19th century. And that's, my friend, is what modern Republicans don't want to say. And that is why a guy like Mike Braun ends up being against interracial marriages as a constitutional principle. Last thing I'll say about it, when he says, they always try to do this dodge, right? Well, we'll just leave it up to the states, it's just a states' rights thing. What's wrong with that? First of all, states' rights was invented by that's always been the argument of the slavers, right? Like people understand that, right? Like the states' rights argument was what the slavers brought at the Constitutional Convention. It's what John C. Calhoun brought when he invented the theory of Southern secession. Like states' rights has always been the last bastion of the slaver. But consider this as well.
In that chapter, Conservative Kryptonite, of your new book, Allow Me to Retort, you write, of course, states did pass laws discriminated against black folks, because if there's one thing about racists, it's that they're never satisfied with being ahead. They need total subjugation of black people to make them feel good about themselves, which is, I think, an accurate psychoanalysis. Okay, last two quick questions. First is a prediction. Guns in cities, totally legal. Everybody can have a gun. Women's reproductive rights or voting rights, or one I didn't think of. Which, just pick one, and because I have one more quick question for you after that.
Pick one for what? Like we're losing all of them.
Well, just for the sake of time, which the prediction of where the court is going on and
okay, so the court's going to overturn Roe v. Wade, but they're not going to say they overturn Roe v. Wade. They're going to say Roe v. Wade stands, but they're going to take out the actual legal meaning that Roe v. Wade stood for, which is the proposition that you can't restrict abortion's pre-fetal viability. They'll take away the viability standard, thus functionally eviscerating Roe, but they won't say they're overturning Roe, so idiots in the mainstream media won't get the story right. So that's coming in June.
Okay, and finally, if you could interview or have a drink with any living person, who would it be?
Merrick freaking Garland.
What? Because you want to talk with him about?
Yeah, talk. That's why I would like to talk with him. I would like to have a conversation with Merrick Garland
about
and try to
college
figure
basketball,
out whether or not he understands that he's the Attorney General of the United States and thus the last line of defense against the people who try to take over the country in a failed coup. I would like to make that point to him in his face. I would like to have the opportunity to ask him why he can't wake up, why he's so afraid of everything, why he won't do the job that he was appointed to do. I would like to ask him these questions. I would like to hear his answer. The argument that I keep getting from people is that Merrick Garland has some super secret, double secret investigation that's happening in parallel with the select committee, and nobody knows about it because he never leaks. I would like to ask him about that super secret investigation if he has one. So yeah, Merrick Garland is my 2022 dinner choice.
You could have picked Chris Rock, but you went with Merrick Garland.
Chris would be fun. Look, Chris, after all that's happened, the thing that I'm looking forward most to is Chris Rock's 2023 comedy special.
Oh yeah, it's
because that's gonna be a sight.
I've been thinking about the material for so long, and you have to wonder if he's gonna just either talk about it for an hour or not at all.
Oh, there's zero chance that's not at all.
I think so, but he's such a thoughtful and good guy. I don't know, but he is. It's going to be amazing.
You can see it in the moment where he decided not to unload on him.
Yeah,
like he wheels back in the seat. He's chirping, and Chris is like, "I could." Nah, and he just
no. That's that. In my opinion, not that you ask, it's because he's so much more enlightened than the guy who hit him. Rock has always been a really thoughtful, enlightened, kind, peaceful guy. He's the guy who sees the person in the corner that doesn't fit in, and he goes over and says, "Hey, buddy." Like he's a good dad. Well,
he didn't see Jada. I mean, that's right. Like that was the. Look,
he's a comedian. I totally have no problem with his joke. He's a comedian. It's a comedy club. I don't think he knew that she had an issue. And if he did, he has no pattern of going after people for, health issues. But
I don't think he knew either, because it fits with my narrative and my understanding of him that he didn't know.
Yeah.
If he did know, that's a problem.
I agree. I agree.
But it's also like we live in this weird world where like I don't. I know we're over time, but like as a person who speaks in public pretty much for a living,
yeah,
I have a strong bias against people attacking people while they're talking, right? Like the range of options that you have if you're at a show and you don't like the show include heckling, booing,
leaving
the show. And if you're really famous, leaving the show, going to find a camera and ripping the person that you don't like a new one. All of those options are open to you. You don't have to sit there and take it. You can do other things. Going up and violence is just like, there's got to be a line, man.
I'm so happy that you're doing well, that the book is #2. The future is so bright for you. You're an American treasure. I love you. I respect you. And I'm super honored that you would sit down with me. And I can't wait to drink rum with you.
We'll do it again soon. I'm sorry it's been so long. We'll make sure we come back together once the weather gets nice.
Anytime, buddy. Thank you.